I'm a 29-year-old woman, and this is the story of how I started breaking a cycle that had been passed down like a family heirloom. I grew up in a quiet suburb where lawns were neat, neighbors waved, and everyone seemed normal from the outside. Inside our house, things were tightly controlled. My mother believed in discipline, not the kind you grow from, but the kind you learn to fear. She called it tough love. What it felt like was always walking on eggshells. I don't remember being comforted when I cried. I remember being told to stop making a scene. If I brought home a scraped knee, I was told to suck it up. In 4th grade, I came home with a swollen eye after a boy hit me during recess. My mother didn't ask if I was okay. She asked, "What did you do to provoke him?" No follow-up. No call to the school. Just the assumption that I must have deserved it. Punishments were never mild. One time I was grounded for rolling my eyes. No books, no TV, no friends, just a chair in the corner for hours. Another time, after she said I was being disrespectful, she handed me a stack of loose leaf paper and told me to write "I will not be disrespectful" 500 times. I finished at 2 a.m. with a cramped hand and tear-stained pages. My father wasn't cruel, but he wasn't there either, not in a way that mattered. He worked long hours, came home tired, and kept his head down. Anytime I pleaded with him, when I asked why I couldn't go to sleepovers, or why my phone was taken away for a B on a test, he just sighed and said, "Ask your mother." He didn't argue with her. I don't think he dared to. Expressing how I felt was never an option. If I tried to speak up, I was accused of being ungrateful or dramatic. She'd tell me, "You'll get it once you're a mother. Then you'll see how hard it is." I stopped talking to her about anything real after that. I got out when I turned 18. I didn't care about college rankings or degree programs. I picked the university that was 10 hours away. That distance was everything. For the first time, I could breathe without being watched. I could make a mistake and not be punished for it. In my 2nd year, I signed up for therapy through student services. I wasn't even sure what I needed. I just wanted to feel normal. My therapist asked me during our 2nd session, "Did it ever feel like your parents scared you more than they loved you?" I didn't know how to answer that. But something inside me knew it was true. I didn't make any announcements, but I started to pull away. I stopped coming home for fall break. I missed Thanksgiving one year and only got a text that said, "Your absence was noticed." Not "we missed you," just cold silence with a hint of guilt. That was the pattern. Affection wasn't freely given, it was conditional. At 25, I had a miscarriage. It was early, barely 6 weeks in. I still remember the cramping, the hospital visit, the quiet sadness that filled the days after. I called my mother because I didn't know who else to tell. Her response was, "Well, maybe your body wasn't ready. These things happen." No pause, no warmth, just the verbal equivalent of a shrug. I didn't reply, I hung up, and I didn't call her again for a while. A year later, I decided to give things one last try. I went home for Thanksgiving. My younger cousin brought his toddler, and we were all gathered in the kitchen when the child knocked over a glass. It shattered, and before anyone could react, my mother's voice cut through the room. She screamed. Not yelled, screamed. The little boy froze. His tiny shoulders shook, and his lip trembled. Everyone stood still. I saw myself in him. I saw every moment I'd ever flinched. Every time my body tensed before my brain even processed what I'd done wrong. That night, while we cleaned up, I asked her quietly why she always went straight to anger. She wiped down the counter, didn't look up, and said, "It's how I was raised. Kids need to fear their parents a little. Otherwise, they walk all over you." I didn't argue. I didn't say anything at all. But in my head, something snapped into place. I went to my childhood room, shut the door, and promised myself if I ever had a child, they'd never feel what I felt. They'd never be afraid to drop a glass. 2 years passed. Then came the test. 2 pink lines. Pregnant. I stood in my bathroom holding the test, and all I could think about was that kitchen. That scream. That look on the toddler's face. I thought about what it meant to bring someone into the world, and who got to be near them. That was when I realized it wasn't just about me anymore. The cycle had to end here. I was 12 weeks pregnant when I told my parents. I waited until after the first scan, after the doctor gave the all clear. I sat across from them at their kitchen table and shared the news, expecting maybe a pause, a smile, even a small moment of warmth. My mother's first question was, "Will you be working after the baby's born?" Not, "Are you okay?" Not, "Do you need anything?" Just that. My father didn't say much. He leaned back in his chair and said, "Let your mother guide you. She knows how to raise a kid." That was the end of the conversation. No hugs, no excitement, just instructions. 2 days later, I started getting emails, articles about baby sleep training, rigid feeding routines, and how to enforce discipline from day one. Most of them came from my mother's account, but a few were from random parenting blogs she'd subscribed me to without asking. She also sent me a list of must-read books, most of them written in the 90s, all of them with titles that made parenting sound like a military operation. And when I mentioned to her that I was planning on using gentle parenting techniques, she didn't even blink before snapping back with, "Good luck raising a spoiled brat." She followed it up with stories from when I was little, how I only listened because I was scared to act out. She said it proudly like it was something to aim for. I talked to my father again. He nodded like he always did and repeated himself, "Just let your mother help. She's done this before." He looked past me as he said it, already checked out of the conversation. A few weeks later, my friends threw me a baby shower at a cozy community center near my apartment. They decorated the place in soft colors, set up a simple buffet, and even made a custom cake with the baby's name piped in icing. My mother showed up in a dress that screamed for attention and a face that made it clear she wasn't impressed. She complained about the decorations, said the food was too bland, criticized the guest list for not including some distant relatives she hadn't spoken to in years. When she saw the name tags on the table, she asked why hers didn't say grandma and said the handwriting was sloppy. During the gift opening, she handed me a heavy, leather-bound book wrapped in shiny gold paper. Inside was a parenting manual from the early 2000s. Tucked inside the front cover was a sticky note that read, "For when you realize you're not as smart as you think." Later that evening, I found out she had pulled one of my friends aside and told her she couldn't wait to reteach the baby properly once the child's old enough to stay with grandma. My friend told me about it right away, nervous that it might cause trouble, but I was glad she did. That night, I called my mother and told her clearly I wasn't comfortable with her watching the baby unsupervised. She laughed and called me hormonal, said I was being paranoid. I didn't respond. The next morning, I got a call from my younger sister. She's close with my mother, always has been. She told me I needed to stop making everything about the past and let them be involved. I asked if she knew about the book or the comment at the shower. She didn't answer directly, just told me not to make a scene. I went to my next therapy session with all of it. The gifts, the judgment, the guilt trips. My therapist helped me draft a message, something firm, not emotional. I took the wording and sent it in a group chat with my mother, father, and sister. It said that while I appreciated their interest, I would be setting clear boundaries. I would not allow criticism of my parenting decisions, and any involvement with the baby would have to be respectful and on my terms. My mother replied 2 minutes later with a sentence I knew too well. "You'll understand when you're a mother." She ended it with a period. No emoji, no warmth. Just that phrase like a sentence. My father replied the next day, "Maybe let her help a little. It'll make things easier. Keep the peace." That was when I understood clearly, peace in our family only existed when no one stood up to her. A week later, I posted a few pictures of the nursery I was setting up. Pale yellow walls, animal prints, soft rugs, and bookshelves lined with bedtime stories. I captioned it with a note about how I couldn't wait to read to my child. My mother commented under the post, "Too soft. No child learns discipline in a pastel room." It was public. A few of my friends replied, but I deleted the comment before it spiraled. I sent her one final message. Direct, clear, without emotion. I told her that if the disrespect continued, if she kept mocking my choices or trying to take over, I would block her number and cut off access completely. No visits, no photos, nothing. She answered back, "You can try. But blood is thicker than pride." That was the last message I received from her. I didn't reply, and I didn't block her, not yet. But I saved every message, every screenshot, every comment, just in case. I didn't tell anyone when I went into labor. No updates, no group chats, just my husband, my best friend, and the hospital staff. It was a quiet drive to the maternity wing, no rush. I had packed the bag a week earlier, and we had arranged everything for a smooth delivery. 12 hours later, my son was born. The hospital had a strict privacy policy. I listed only my husband as an approved visitor. My mother called the front desk twice trying to get our room number. She said she was next of kin and claimed she was being kept in the dark by mistake. The nurses didn't budge. They marked her as restricted on our chart. 1 week after we got home, I allowed a visit. I set the terms clearly, 1 hour, supervised, no surprises. My mother walked in, glanced at the baby sleeping on my chest, and immediately said I was holding him too much and that I'd make him soft. She didn't sit down before offering her take on our feeding schedule and how the baby's swaddle looked too loose. My husband brought her tea. She looked him over and asked if he was planning to go back to work soon. He said he had 3 more weeks of paternity leave. She scoffed and told him he was too soft to be a father if he needed time off just to hold a baby. He didn't reply. He just went to check the bottle warmer. Then the baby stirred and started to cry. Before I could react, she stepped forward, scooped him up from my arms, and started pacing the room, bouncing him and muttering about how babies need confident arms, if not nervous ones. I asked her to give him back. She hesitated, then turned slowly and handed him over like I was taking away something she'd earned. She looked at me like I'd insulted her. "Don't you trust me?" I didn't answer. I just cradled him and sat back down. Later that visit, I handed her sanitizer and asked her to wash her hands. She laughed and said, "We never did this in our time, and we all survived." I didn't argue. I just stood up and said the visit was over. My husband walked her out. 2 days later, my father came by on his own. No warning, but he knocked politely. He didn't stay long. He looked at the baby, nodded, and placed an envelope on the coffee table. "Just don't keep us from him," he said before leaving. We opened it later. There was a check inside. No note, just money. The next morning, my mother showed up without calling. She rang the bell and stood there with 3 shopping bags, 2 of which were filled with loud plastic toys, flashing lights, singing buttons, things I had specifically said we didn't want in the house. She stepped inside like it was still her space and started placing items around the nursery. One of the bags had a baby monitor. It came with 2 cameras, one that looked like a normal stand-up device and another smaller one that blended into the side of the toy shelf. My husband noticed the blinking light later that night when he went to grab a blanket. It was recording. We checked the box. The second camera wasn't listed anywhere on the label. He unplugged both and took everything out of the room. The next morning, I called her. I asked directly about the second camera. She didn't deny it. "It's for your own good," she said. "You'll thank me someday." And I didn't thank her. I blocked her number that night. My husband repacked the monitor and mailed it back with a typed note that said, "We're done." My younger sister texted 2 hours later. No greeting. Just paragraph after paragraph about how I was ruining a family and denying a child his right to a grandmother. She told me I was acting like I had a perfect past and everyone else was the villain. She said I was blowing things out of proportion and creating drama where there didn't need to be any. I waited until morning, then replied once. I told her he has the right to safety, not exposure to trauma. Goodbye. I blocked her too. I printed copies of all the messages, filed them with the baby's pediatric documents, and updated our emergency contact list. My best friend is now listed as our secondary guardian in case anything ever happens to me or my husband. The next week, I added a video doorbell system. Anyone standing outside can now be recorded in full. The baby's room now has a single, secure monitor with audio only. No hidden features. No blinking lights. I didn't change the locks, but I gave my building manager a heads up. No one who isn't on our approved list can be buzzed in without our permission. The last message I read from my mother came in the form of a forwarded email. She had sent baby photos to an old coworker of mine, along with a message that said, "Still trying to be a parent without knowing what it means." The coworker apologized for sharing it, but said I should know what was being said behind my back. That was the moment I deleted every trace of contact. Phone, email, photos, shared cloud folders. I kept only what was needed for documentation. My son's first smile came a few days later. No audience, no judgment. Just me, my husband, and the soft light of the nursery we chose. 2 weeks after I blocked my mother and younger sister, the messages started showing up again, only this time, through email. The first one had the subject line baby formula coupon inside, and was sent from an account I didn't recognize. The name looked fake. But the message inside wasn't about coupons. It was short, "You're overreacting. Let us see him before it's too late." A second email came the next day, then a third. Different names, different addresses, but the tone was always the same: guilt, pressure, veiled threats wrapped in concern. My husband opened one of them and noticed the writing style matched something my sister once posted publicly. He ran a trace using a header tool. One email had been sent through her work network. We contacted a family lawyer that week. After reviewing everything, screenshots, timestamps, even the original monitor footage, he drafted a cease and desist notice addressed to both my mother and sister. It included a warning about indirect harassment, using third parties or false identities to contact us, and stated clearly that future violations could result in legal action. We mailed it certified with return receipt. 3 days after that, our next-door neighbor handed me a greeting card. It had a baby bunny on the front and pink lettering that said, "Thinking of you." She smiled and said, "This came for you, no return address." Someone asked me to pass it along. Inside the card was a folded sheet of notebook paper, my mother's handwriting. She had written that she forgave me, that one day I would come crawling back, and that she was only trying to protect my child from modern parenting nonsense. The last line read, "I was your mother first, and I always will be." I thanked the neighbor and explained the situation. She was stunned. She had thought she was helping deliver a harmless note from a friend. She apologized and said she'd decline anything from them in the future. 2 days later, my office line rang with a flagged number. The receptionist said someone had called claiming to be my emergency contact and asking about my maternity leave status. The person hung up when asked for their name. My workplace filed a report and marked my employee profile with a note, "Unauthorized contact attempt, family harassment." That same week, I noticed a silver car parked across from our house for 2 nights in a row, not moving, lights off. My husband checked the doorbell camera recordings. The second night, the camera picked up my father stepping out, walking up the path, and leaving a brown paper bag on our porch. He didn't knock. He just walked away and drove off. We checked the bag carefully before opening it. Inside were baby socks, some old photo albums from when I was a child, and a letter addressed to my daughter and grandson. It wasn't angry. It wasn't dramatic. It was guilt in neat, polite handwriting. He wrote that my mother meant well, and that no one really believed you'd keep us out for good. He asked us to reconsider before it was too late for reconciliation. I brought the letter to my next therapy session. My therapist read parts of it out loud and pointed to phrases that looked kind but carried weight: blame, dismissal, control disguised as love. She reminded me that manipulation doesn't always show up as yelling. Sometimes it wears a soft voice and pretends it's care. That same week, my husband's parents invited us over for dinner. They asked if we wanted them to step in more formally, as emergency contacts, as backup support, as people we could depend on. We accepted. They helped us contact a digital privacy specialist who walked us through removing our names and address from public databases, mailing lists, and real estate directories. We set up stronger spam filters, 2-step authentication for every account, and upgraded our doorbell camera to store footage for 90 days instead of 7. Then just when things started to feel normal, my son had a mild allergic reaction after trying a new food. His skin broke out in hives, and he started fussing in a way that wasn't like him. My husband drove us straight to urgent care while I kept our son upright in the back seat. They administered antihistamines, monitored his breathing, and confirmed it wasn't an emergency. After we got home and the panic wore off, I noticed something. At no point during that scare did I think to call my mother. Not once. Not when we were in the car. Not while sitting in the exam room. Not even afterward. That absence didn't hurt. It felt like proof. People always say you understand your parents better when you become one. That's not what happened to me. Motherhood didn't make me understand mine. It made me protect my child from people like her. A woman I hadn't seen since childhood rang my doorbell on a Wednesday afternoon. She introduced herself by name, but I recognized her face before she even finished. She used to run the kids program at my old church, back when I was still dragged there every Sunday. She held a gift bag in one hand and a Bible in the other. She said my mother had reached out, said I was struggling, and asked her to come pray with me and help mend the broken bond between mother and daughter. I stepped outside and closed the door behind me. She smiled, handed me a card, and started talking about forgiveness. She said it was divine, and that children who hold grudges invite sorrow into their homes. Inside the card was a printed Bible verse. Below it, a handwritten message: forgiveness is godly. Children who withhold it will suffer. No signature. No doubt who wrote it. I told the woman, calmly, that I appreciated her visit but did not welcome it. I made it clear she shouldn't return or deliver any more messages on my mother's behalf. She looked stunned. She said my mother must be heartbroken. The day that I changed, I didn't answer. I waited until she walked back to her car before I went inside and tossed the card in the shredder. That same night, a post popped up from someone I barely knew, a college classmate who was friendly with my sister. The post didn't name me, but it was obvious. It talked about modern parents being too soft on their own parents and forgetting who raised them. A few comments were made about people blocking their own blood over minor things. The timing wasn't a coincidence. The same person messaged me directly 2 days later. She started with small talk. then offered advice about how I might regret cutting off my family someday and how grandparents are important. She claimed she was being neutral. I didn't respond. I screenshot the message and added it to a private folder I had started keeping. My husband's mother asked about everything after reading the post. She said she supported us but wanted to make sure we weren't being too extreme. I walked her through the full timeline, every boundary crossed, every message sent, every backdoor attempt. She didn't ask again. Instead, she offered to pay for another year of cloud storage for our security footage and online backups. A week later, my cousin, one I hadn't heard from in a while, sent me a voice message. He said he had recorded a conversation at a family dinner where my mother had broken down crying. She said I had stolen her only grandchild, and she only ever wanted to teach discipline the way real mothers do. Near the end of the clip, she said something else. One day, that baby's going to rebel, and she'll wish I were around. I saved the clip. I didn't reply. The same cousin sent a follow-up text saying maybe it would help me see her heart. It didn't. My therapist, one who specializes in postpartum dynamics, listened to the clip with me during our next session. She pointed out how guilt and nostalgia were being used as weapons. She explained how statements like real mothers and when he rebels weren't emotional slips, they were attempts to plant fear, to make me second-guess myself as a parent. That weekend, a package arrived addressed to my son. It was covered in cartoon stamps and written in bright ink like a child's birthday card. Inside was a toddler shirt with glittery letters, Grandma's favorite. There was also a note, "Don't punish him for your trauma. He deserves a family." I didn't open the rest. I wrote return to sender in red permanent marker, crossed out the return address, and dropped it back at the post office within the hour. I took a photo of the label and added it to the file. 2 days later, I ran into my sister in the parking lot of a grocery store. She was parked 2 rows over and walked toward me while I was strapping my son's car seat in. She called my name, then stood behind my car until I closed the trunk. She started talking, fast, angry, almost shouting. She said I was insane, said I was robbing my son of a real family. She called my parenting choices selfish. She said our mother was in pain and that my father was wasting away in sadness. I didn't yell. I didn't explain. I just said, "If you ever try to bypass me again, I'll file for a restraining order." She stared for a second, blinked hard, and turned away. That night, I drove to a supply store and bought a second fireproof safe. I placed it in the back of my closet, behind a box of winter coats. Then I started writing, 1 letter per birthday, each one addressed to my son. Each one short, clear, and dated. Not to blame, not to burden. Just to explain why I made the decisions I did. Why some people weren't in his life. Why safety came first. Why love isn't just blood, it's behavior. The line wasn't just drawn anymore. It was carved in stone. When my maternity leave ended, I enrolled my son in a small, private daycare near my husband's office. We toured 6 places before choosing it. They had strong policies, including a strict rule. No child could be picked up by anyone not listed on the approved contact form. Every adult needed to give a code word and show ID. It felt secure. 3 weeks in, I noticed a new face during pickup. A part-time employee, working afternoons. Afkaura. She looked familiar, but I couldn't place her at first. She didn't speak to me, just smiled politely, holding a clipboard and helping guide the kids from room to room. By the 4th day, it hit me. She was the daughter of one of my mother's close friends. I remembered her from birthday parties and awkward teenage hangouts at church functions. She had babysat my sister once or twice when we were kids. We weren't close, but she was definitely tied to my mother's circle. I kept calm. I asked the daycare director privately if there was camera access for parents. She said yes. I requested a review of my son's classroom footage from the last 3 days. The footage showed that while she hadn't done anything overt, she had consistently hovered near my son. During outdoor time, she followed his group closely. During playtime, she leaned down to speak to him several times, even when other teachers were handling the group. At one point, she touched his back and whispered something. He didn't respond. I asked if she had been assigned to his group specifically. The director looked surprised. After checking her intake file, she confirmed the employee had requested that group after asking which children were new. She had asked for my son by name. We acted immediately. I explained everything, the no contact orders, the harassment, the family history. The director met with the employee privately and terminated her contract the next morning. No confrontation, no warning. Just a clean removal. We filed a police report the same day. It was classified under stalking and an unauthorized attempt to access a minor. I gave them the daycare footage, the prior cease and desist letters, and the name of the former employee's mother. The officer agreed it showed a pattern. He wrote up an official record and forwarded it to the department's legal unit. Another cease and desist letter was drafted, this time addressed to both my mother and her friend. The language was stronger. It stated that any future third-party attempts to contact, observe, or approach my son would result in legal action. It also included a demand to cease any distribution of his photos, name, or personal information. My therapist reviewed everything with me the next day. She didn't speak in metaphors or soft encouragement. She said clearly this wasn't emotional abuse anymore. This was obsession. My husband had been steady through everything up until this point. But that evening, he looked at me across the kitchen table and said, "She's done. Forever. Not a word. Not a photo. We're finished." We created an emergency protocol with the daycare. Only 3 names were on the authorized pickup list: me, my husband, and his mother. Yeah. Each of us had a unique password. The front desk was instructed to call the police if anyone attempted pickup without matching credentials. We gave a printed photo of the woman who had been fired and noted her name in bold red ink on their restricted list. That weekend, I went through every single social media account. I removed anyone who had ever tagged me in old photos, shared anything about my son, or was still loosely connected to my mother's network. High school friends, extended cousins, former coworkers gone. I started fresh with a private account limited to 5 people. 2 days later, a text came from an unknown number. Well, the message read, "I'm sorry you see me as the enemy. I just wanted to help. You'll regret this. I didn't reply. I filed a harassment report with my phone carrier and requested a printed log of contact from all unknown numbers. They sent it 2 days later and flagged the number as having sent similar messages before. That night, I changed my number. I gave the new one to only 5 people: my husband, his parents, my best friend, the daycare, and my therapist. That was it. No extended family. No old contacts. My world went quieter overnight. There was no dramatic ending. No final confrontation. Just silence. And somewhere in that silence, I finally understood what they all meant when they used to say, "You'll understand when you're a mother." They were right. I do understand now. That's exactly why I chose to cut them off. So my son never has to. 2 months after changing my phone number, a white envelope landed in our mailbox. It was stamped with court markings. Inside was a summons. My mother was filing for grandparent visitation rights under the state's family code. She claimed she had been cut off unjustly and cited emotional harm to her grandson due to forced separation. Until then, I didn't even know that was a legal option. But after some research, I learned our state had an estrangement clause. It allowed grandparents to file for visitation if they could prove a pre-existing bond and that the child was harmed by the distance. The law was written to protect children, not grandparents, but it was being used here in a way that didn't fit. We called our attorney the same day. After reviewing the documents, she wasn't worried. My mother had no real relationship with my son, no unsupervised visits, no bond to speak of. What we did have was documentation, plenty of it: harassment logs, police reports, security footage, cease and desist letters, daycare surveillance, letters disguised as packages, a full file organized and ready. The court scheduled a hearing 2 months out. It would be formal. Both sides would present arguments, witnesses, and evidence. In preparation, I spent 2 weeks compiling everything into one digital folder. My husband and I labeled every piece by date: the daycare incident, the church visitor, the secret monitor, the uninvited job infiltration. Everything was cross-referenced and printed. Then something unexpected happened. Our old neighbor, the one who had unknowingly passed along my mother's letter, reached out through our attorney. She said she wanted to testify. She'd seen the pattern: the surprise visits, the pressure, the way my sister talked at the mailbox. She didn't want to stay neutral anymore. She said she had kids of her own now, and what she'd witnessed haunted her. As the court date approached, I began experiencing panic attacks. Short breaths, tight chest, sudden dizziness. The first one hit in the grocery store while picking up diapers. My doctor signed me off work for a month and referred me to a trauma-focused therapist who specialized in postpartum recovery. Family tension grew quickly. A cousin I had been close to since childhood messaged me, "I don't agree with your mom's approach, but cutting off your whole family? That's cold." I didn't reply. I archived the message and added her to the list of people I no longer trusted with my son's safety. Meanwhile, my husband sat down one evening and wrote a statement for court. It was short, less than a page. He didn't mention the cameras or the police reports. He focused on what he had seen firsthand: the way I had protected our son, the times I had shaken after finding notes in our mailbox. He ended it with one line: "My wife is protecting her son the way she was never protected." The day of the hearing arrived. We entered the courtroom early. My mother walked in 20 minutes later with a new lawyer and my sister beside her. She didn't look at me once. My sister glanced over but quickly looked away. Her lawyer spoke first. He argued that my mother was a loving grandparent being denied access to her only grandchild. He called it generational miscommunication. My mother took the stand and cried within seconds. She said she only wanted to love him. She claimed I was not myself since the birth and being manipulated by my controlling husband. She said she feared for her grandson's development and knew something was wrong. Then it was my turn. I kept my answers brief. I brought no emotion, just facts. When asked directly whether I believed my mother should be part of my son's life, I said clearly, no. For his safety, peace, and development, absolutely not. The judge asked if I believed future contact could be safe. I said, "She has violated every boundary I've ever set. I don't believe safety is possible with her involved." The judge didn't hesitate. He ruled in our favor. His words were direct. This is not a case of loving grandparents being denied access. This is a case of boundary violation, harassment, and maternal instinct being criminalized. He dismissed the petition with prejudice. That week, I sent one final letter through our attorney. I didn't write it to explain anything. I didn't offer forgiveness. I didn't ask questions. I ended it with one paragraph: "This is not a punishment. This is protection. You made your choice. I made mine." We moved 2 months later. New house. New town. A name change filed through the court for privacy. We left behind the porch camera, the panic buttons, the daily tension. My son just turned 2. He runs through the backyard with his shoes on the wrong feet and laughs so hard he snorts. He doesn't flinch when someone raises their voice. He doesn't know fear behind a grandmother's smile. He knows bedtime stories, soft blankets, safe hugs. For the first time, I breathed without checking a window. And I finally understood what it means to be a mother. It's not repeating what was done to you, but choosing what never was.